Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but I believe this letter is meant for you.
The police officer's hand was shaking when he handed me the note. Not the kind of shake you get from too much coffee. The kind you get when you've seen something that makes you question everything you thought you knew about your neighbors. "Sir, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Officer Thompson said, his voice barely above a whisper despite us being alone in the station parking lot. "Do not go home tonight. Get somewhere safe." I stared at the folded paper in my palm like it might explode. 20 minutes ago, I'd been fixing Mrs. Patterson's kitchen sink, thinking my biggest problem was whether to charge her full price for the third callback this month. Now I'm standing in the February cold, wondering why a cop looks more scared than I've ever seen anyone look in this sleepy Maine town. "What the hell is going on?" I asked. "You called me to pick up Sarah from a speeding ticket. Since when does that require witness protection?" Thompson glanced around the empty lot, then stepped closer. "Your wife. She wasn't just speeding, Jake. She was coming from the Riverside Motel, room 12. She's been there every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months. My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a bowling ball. "So she's having an affair. That's not exactly police business unless... Read the note." I unfolded it with fingers that suddenly felt like sausages. The handwriting was Sarah's, but the words belonged to someone I'd never met. "Tom, we can't keep waiting. Jake suspects something. Phase 2 starts Monday. The property transfer papers are ready. Once he's out, we move everything to your accounts. Don't worry about him causing trouble. I've already talked to Dr. Mitchell about the mental health evaluation. 2 more weeks and this nightmare is over." The world tilted sideways. I read it again, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Something that didn't sound like my wife of 8 years planning to destroy my life. "Where did you get this?" My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "She dropped it when I pulled her over. Didn't even notice." "Jake, there's more." Thompson looked around again, then pulled out his phone. "I wasn't supposed to see this, but your neighbor, Mrs. Collins, called in a noise complaint last week. She said Sarah was screaming at someone on the phone about moving money before you noticed." I felt like someone had replaced my blood with ice water. "Tom who?" "Tom Brennan. Owns the Honda dealership and that new gym downtown. Real smooth talker. Also real good at making people's problems disappear." "Brennan," I knew the name. Flashy guy, always had the newest BMW. Always seemed to have his hands in every business deal in town. Sarah had mentioned him a few times. Said he was one of the medical office's biggest accounts, always bringing his employees in for checkups. "Thompson, why are you telling me this? Why not just arrest them?" The officer's face went grim. "Because what they're planning isn't technically illegal until they do it. Moving money, filing false mental health reports, property fraud. That's all gray area stuff until the ink dries. But Jake..." He gripped my shoulder. "I've been a cop for 15 years. I've seen what happens when people get desperate. Your wife thinks she's found her way out, and she's not going to let anything stop her." I stared at the note again, trying to process that the woman I'd shared a bed with for 8 years was planning to have me declared mentally unstable, that she'd been cheating on me for 3 months, that she was moving our money, my money, to some slick car dealer who probably saw her as nothing more than an easy mark. "What do you suggest I do?" "Don't go home tonight. Stay somewhere she can't find you. And Jake, start documenting everything, every conversation, every phone call, every time she leaves the house. You're going to need proof of what they're doing, and you're going to need it fast." I folded the note and shoved it into my jacket pocket. "Thanks, Thompson. I owe you one. Just be careful. And Jake, whatever you do, don't let them know you're onto them. People get unpredictable when they feel cornered." I drove to Danny's apartment in a daze. Danny Kowalski had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both too stupid to know that working with our hands would actually make us more money than half the college graduates in town. He was a mechanic, I was a handyman, and we'd spent the last 20 years fixing other people's problems while apparently being blind to our own. "Jesus, Jake, you look like someone ran over your dog," Danny said when he opened the door. "And since you don't have a dog, I'm guessing this is about Sarah." I handed him the note without a word, watched his face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally the same sick understanding that was still churning in my stomach. Holy shit, man. She's been planning this for months. 3 months, according to Thompson. 3 months of lying to my face every morning, kissing me goodbye, and then driving to some motel to screw a car dealer. Danny whistled low. Brennan's bad news. Had his Beamer in my shop last month. Guy owes money all over town, but he talks like he's Donald Trump. What kind of mental health evaluation? The kind where your wife has a doctor friend declare you unstable so she can take control of your assets. I slumped onto his couch. I've been so focused on building the business, I never saw it coming. That's because you're not a sociopath, Danny said. Normal people don't think like this. But Jake, you're not exactly helpless here. You know every contractor in 3 counties. You've got your own business. And unlike pretty boy Brennan, people actually trust you. He was right. I'd spent 15 years building a reputation in this town. I fixed people's problems, showed up when I said I would, and charged fair prices. Sarah might have the medical connections and Brennan might have the money, but I had something they didn't. I actually belonged here. So, what's the plan? Danny asked. I need to know exactly what they're planning and when. Thompson said not to let them know I'm onto them, so I play along. Stupid, trusting husband who doesn't notice his wife working late every Tuesday and Thursday. And then, I looked at the note again, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Then I show them what happens when you try to steal from someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. The next morning, I went home like nothing had happened. Sarah was in the kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone with the kind of casual indifference that should have been my first clue months ago. How was your night at Danny's? She asked without looking up. Fine. Thanks for letting me know you made it home safe, by the way. I poured myself coffee, watching her face in the reflection of the toaster. Sorry, I was exhausted. That speeding ticket was so embarrassing. I can't believe I was going 45 in a 30 zone. Interesting. Thompson had said she was doing 60 in a 45. Sarah was already lying about the details, probably to keep her story straight in case I talked to the cop. What were you doing out that way anyway? I asked. Riverside Road doesn't go anywhere except the motel and the old quarry. For just a second, her hand tightened on the coffee mug. I was visiting Linda. You remember Linda from work? She lives in one of those new condos? Linda Patterson? Short blonde woman, always complains about her back. That's her. Funny thing, I was just at Linda's house yesterday fixing her sink. She lives on Maple Street, about 15 miles in the opposite direction. Sarah's face went through a fascinating sequence of expressions, panic, calculation, then practiced innocence. Oh, I meant Linda Morrison, the new girl. Right, I smiled and kissed the top of her head. Well, I've got 3 jobs today, so I won't be home until late. Okay, honey. Love you. Love you too. I made it to my truck before I started laughing. It wasn't funny exactly, but there was something almost impressive about how smoothly she lied. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her. My first stop was the library. I needed to understand exactly what Sarah and Brennan were planning, and that meant research. I spent 2 hours reading about property transfers, mental health evaluations, and financial fraud. The picture that emerged was both simpler and more terrifying than I'd expected. In Maine, if you can prove someone is mentally unstable, you can petition for guardianship of their assets. If Sarah had Dr. Mitchell falsify a mental health evaluation, she could theoretically gain control of our joint accounts, our house, even my business. Once she had that control, moving the money to Brennan would be as simple as signing a few papers. But here's the thing about legal theft. It only works if your victim doesn't see it coming. I drove to the medical office where Sarah worked. It was a small practice, just Dr. Peterson, his partner Dr. Mitchell, and 3 staff members, including Sarah. I'd been there enough times to know the layout, know the routines, know which windows faced the parking lot. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30, Sarah came out for her lunch break, but instead of going to the sandwich shop like usual, she walked 3 blocks to the First National Bank. I followed at a distance, watching her go inside. 20 minutes later, she came out with a manila envelope and a satisfied smile. That evening, I made dinner and asked about her day like nothing had happened. Sarah told me about difficult patients and insurance problems, painting herself as the overworked, underappreciated office manager who barely had time to breathe, let alone carry on an elaborate affair. Oh, I need to run an errand tomorrow evening, she said while we were cleaning dishes. Dr. Mitchell wants me to deliver some paperwork to a patient. What kind of paperwork? Just medical forms. Nothing exciting. Want me to come with you? I could grab dinner while you handle the delivery. That's sweet, but it'll be boring. Besides, you hate driving in the dark. True enough, but I had a feeling Sarah's errand had nothing to do with medical forms and everything to do with Tom Brennan. The next evening, I told Sarah I was going to Danny's to watch the game. Instead, I parked behind the grocery store with a clear view of our driveway. At 7:15, Sarah's Honda backed out and headed toward downtown. I followed her to Brennan's dealership. The lot was empty except for a few cars and Brennan's BMW parked by the service entrance. Sarah pulled up next to it, and a few seconds later, Tom Brennan came out of the building. Even from a distance, I could see why Sarah might find him appealing. Tall, expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of confident swagger that screamed success. He opened her car door like a gentleman, kissed her cheek like a lover, and led her inside the building. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching their silhouettes move past the windows of what I assumed was Brennan's office. When they finally came out, Brennan was carrying a briefcase, and Sarah looked like she'd just won the lottery. They kissed goodbye, not the polite peck of business associates, but the kind of deep, passionate kiss that belongs in bedrooms, not parking lots. Then Sarah drove home, and Brennan got in his BMW and headed in the opposite direction. I beat her home by 10 minutes, just enough time to crack open a beer and find something mindless on television. "How was your evening?" I asked when she walked in. "Boring. Dr. Mitchell's patient lives way out in the country, and the poor woman can barely get around. I felt terrible for her." "That was nice of you to make a house call. It's part of the job." I nodded sympathetically, wondering how she'd explain the lipstick on her collar if I bothered to point it out. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Sarah would go to work, I would follow her around town documenting her meetings with Brennan, and in the evenings we'd have dinner and pretend our marriage wasn't a complete fiction. But I was learning things, like the fact that Brennan owned more than just the dealership. He also had stakes in the new gym, a construction company, and at least 3 rental properties around town. I was learning that Sarah had opened a new bank account without telling me, and that she'd been photographing our financial documents when she thought I wasn't looking. Most importantly, I was learning that they weren't as smart as they thought they were. On Friday, I followed Sarah to her lunch meeting with Dr. Mitchell. They sat in a corner booth at Angelo's restaurant, huddled over paperwork like they were planning a military operation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Dr. Mitchell sliding documents across the table and Sarah nodding eagerly. When Sarah went to the bathroom, Dr. Mitchell made a phone call. Even from across the restaurant, I could read his lips well enough to know he was talking to someone about evaluation schedules and emergency procedures. That evening, Danny came over for dinner. Sarah cooked, playing the perfect hostess, while Danny and I discussed work and sports and all the meaningless stuff that fills the spaces between real conversations. "Jake's been working so hard lately," Sarah said, refilling Danny's wine glass. "Sometimes I worry he's pushing himself too much." "Yeah, he's been a little stressed," Danny agreed, playing along perfectly. "But that's what happens when business is good. Still, all that pressure can't be healthy. Sometimes I think he should talk to someone professional, just to make sure he's handling everything okay." Danny and I exchanged glances. "Professional like a therapist?" Danny asked. "Or a psychiatrist? Just for a consultation. There's no shame in taking care of your mental health." "That's very thoughtful of you, honey," I said. "But I think I'm doing okay." "Of course you are. I just want to make sure you stay that way." After Danny left, Sarah curled up next to me on the couch and started talking about our future. How maybe we should think about refinancing the house to free up some cash flow. How her friend had made a killing in some real estate investment opportunity. How important it was to make sure all our legal documents were up to date. "What kind of legal documents?" I asked. "Oh, wills, power of attorney, that kind of thing. Just in case something happens." "Something like what?" "Nothing specific. It's just smart to be prepared." She was good, I had to give her that. If I hadn't known what she was really planning, her concern would have seemed genuine. Loving, even. But I did know, and every word felt like a knife in my back. That weekend, I told Sarah I was going fishing with Danny. Instead, we drove to Portland to do some real investigating. If Brennan was as shady as Thompson suggested, there had to be records somewhere. We hit the courthouse first, looking up property transfers and business filings. What we found was interesting. Brennan had a pattern of forming partnerships with people who ended up losing everything while he walked away clean. 3 different business partners over the last 5 years, all of them left holding debt, while Brennan moved on to bigger and better things. "Guy's a professional parasite," Danny said, scrolling through bankruptcy filings on the library computer. "He finds someone with assets, convinces them to go into business with him, then bleeds them dry." "But why Sarah? She's got a decent job, but it's not like we're rich." "You own your house free and clear, right?" You got the business, tools, equipment, plus whatever you've saved over the years. To a guy like Brennan, that probably looks like easy money. Danny was right. I'd been thinking like someone who worked for what he had, not like someone who made a living taking what other people worked for. On Monday, Sarah announced that she'd made an appointment with Dr. Mitchell for me. Just a general wellness check, she said. He's offering them to all the office staff families as a benefit. I feel fine, Sarah. I know you do, but it can't hurt to have a professional confirm that, right? Besides, it's free. Free, like the evaluation that would declare me mentally unstable was some kind of gift. When's the appointment? Thursday at 2. I already cleared it with your clients. She'd called my clients without asking me. I felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. That was thoughtful of you. I try to take care of you, Jake. Thursday morning, I drove to Dr. Mitchell's office with a digital recorder in my pocket and a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Dr. Mitchell was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-30s, with the kind of earnest face that belonged in pharmaceutical ads. He shook my hand warmly and invited me to sit in the leather chair across from his desk. So, Jake, Sarah tells me you've been under some stress lately. Has she? That's interesting because I haven't mentioned being stressed. Dr. Mitchell glanced at his notes. She's concerned about your behavior. Says you've been paranoid, suspicious, having trouble sleeping. Doctor, I sleep 8 hours a night, and I haven't been suspicious of anything until this week. What happened this week? This week, I found out my wife is having an affair with Tom Brennan and planning to steal my assets by having you declare me mentally unstable. The color drained from Dr. Mitchell's face. For a few seconds, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then his professional mask slipped back into place. Jake, those are very serious accusations. What makes you think... I have photos of them together. I have bank records showing Sarah moving money without my knowledge. I have a note in my wife's handwriting discussing property transfers and mental health evaluations. And doctor? I leaned forward in my chair. I have you on tape discussing evaluation schedules with my wife at Angelo's restaurant last Friday. Dr. Mitchell's hands were shaking now. Jake, I think you might be misunderstanding. Am I? Because it seems pretty clear. Sarah brings you falsified evidence of my mental decline. You rubber stamp an evaluation declaring me unfit. She gets power of attorney over my assets, and then she transfers everything to her boyfriend. What do you get out of it, doctor? Money? Or is Sarah offering other incentives? This is preposterous. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Sure. I stood up and headed for the door. But doctor, when this all comes out, and it will come out, remember that I gave you a chance to do the right thing. I left him sitting at his desk, staring at his phone like it might explode. That evening, Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement. How did your appointment go? She asked the second I walked through the door. Fine, Dr. Mitchell seems like a nice guy. Did he mention anything about follow-up visits? Not really, why? Oh, just curious, I know he likes to be thorough. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? I mean, with us, with our life together? For just a moment, her face softened, and I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married. Then the mask slipped back into place. Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Just checking. But I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Doctor. Mitchell had probably called her the moment I left his office, and now she was wondering how much I actually knew. Friday morning, I got a call from Thompson. Jake, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the diner on Route 9? 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from the cop who'd started this whole nightmare, trying to read the expression on his face. Dr. Mitchell filed a report yesterday, Thompson said without preamble. Says you came to his office making wild accusations, talking about conspiracy theories, exhibiting paranoid behavior. Did he mention that I had evidence of everything I accused him of? He said you claimed to have evidence. There's a difference. Thompson, you know this is all bullshit. I know, but, Jake, they are moving faster than we expected. Sarah filed a petition this morning requesting emergency evaluation of your mental state. If Judge Williams approves it, you could be involuntarily committed for observation. My blood turned to ice. Can they do that? With a doctor's recommendation and a spouse's petition? Yeah, they can. You'd have 3 days to prove you're competent, and guess who'd be controlling your assets while you're locked up? How long do I have? The hearing is Monday morning. Jake, you need to get a lawyer. You need to get evidence, and you need to be very careful about what you do between now and then, because if you give them any ammunition, I know. I stared out the window at the gray Maine landscape, thinking about how quickly your whole life could be stolen by people who were supposed to love you. Thompson, what would you do? If you were in my position? The cop was quiet for a long time. I'd make sure everyone in town knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. And how would I do that? Hypothetically, I'd wait for them to make a mistake. People like Brennan and your wife, they get cocky when they think they're winning. They overplay their hands. Hypothetically. That afternoon, I made a series of phone calls. To my lawyer, to my bank, to every client I'd worked for in the last 5 years. By evening, I had documentation of every job I'd completed, every satisfied customer, every payment made on time. I had character references from half the town and a paper trail showing 8 years of steady, responsible behavior. But more importantly, I had a plan. Saturday morning, Sarah announced that she was going shopping with her sister in Portland and wouldn't be back until evening. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I got to work. First, I drove to Brennan's dealership. It was closed, but I knew enough about buildings to know that the new security system he'd bragged about was more show than substance. I didn't break in. I didn't need to. I just needed to confirm what I suspected about his business practices. The dumpster behind the building told the whole story. Financial documents showing inflated loan values, insurance claims for vehicles that never existed, customer contracts with altered terms. Brennan wasn't just a con man. He was a sloppy con man who threw away evidence instead of shredding it. I photographed everything, then drove to the gym Brennan co-owned. Same story, falsified membership numbers, equipment leased under fraudulent terms, tax documents showing income that couldn't possibly exist. By the time I was done, I had enough evidence to put Tom Brennan away for a very long time. But I wasn't done yet. Sunday afternoon, I drove to the Riverside Motel and had a friendly chat with the desk clerk. $50 and a sob story about divorce proceedings got me copies of the registration records for room 12. Sarah and Brennan had been meeting there twice a week for 4 months, always paying cash, always using fake names. Sunday evening, Sarah came home with shopping bags and a guilty conscience. "I bought you something," she said, handing me a wrapped box. Inside was an expensive watch, the kind of gift someone buys when they're feeling guilty about destroying your life. "It's beautiful, Sarah. What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just saw it and thought of you." "That's sweet. Hey, I've been thinking about what you said about updating our legal documents. Maybe we should do that soon." "Really?" "Yeah. Life's unpredictable. We should make sure we're protected." The relief on her face was almost comical. "I'll call the lawyer tomorrow." "Great. And Sarah, I love you. I love you too, Jake." If she felt any shame about lying to my face, she hid it perfectly. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of wind that cuts through your jacket and reminds you that winter in Maine doesn't end just because the calendar says it should. I dressed carefully, khakis, button-down shirt, tie, the uniform of respectability. I wanted to look like the kind of man who pays his taxes, loves his wife, and would never cause trouble for anyone. The courthouse was nearly empty when I arrived. Judge Williams was known for running a quiet courtroom, and mental health hearings weren't exactly public entertainment. Sarah was already there with Dr. Mitchell and a lawyer I didn't recognize, probably someone Brennan had recommended. They sat in the front row, whispering urgently among themselves. My lawyer, Jim Patterson, met me at the defendant's table. Jim had handled the closing when I bought my house, and he'd been recommended by 3 different people as someone who didn't lose cases. "How are we looking, Jim?" "Honestly, not great. They've got a doctor's evaluation and a spouse's testimony. Judge Williams tends to err on the side of caution when it comes to mental health issues. And if he rules against me? 72-hour involuntary hold for observation. During that time, Sarah would have power of attorney over your assets. Long enough to clean out the accounts. More than long enough. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Williams presiding. Judge Williams was exactly what you'd expect from a small-town judge. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of face that had seen every lie and excuse in the book. He looked over the paperwork with the thoroughness of someone who took his job seriously. "This is a petition for emergency mental health evaluation," he began. "Mrs. Sanders, you're requesting that your husband be involuntarily committed for psychiatric observation?" Sarah stood up, and I had to admire her performance. She looked like the concerned wife, worried sick about her husband's deteriorating mental state. Yes, Your Honor. Jake has been exhibiting increasingly paranoid behavior over the past several weeks. He's making wild accusations against me and my coworkers, claiming we're involved in some kind of conspiracy against him. What kind of accusations? He thinks I'm having an affair. He thinks my doctor is falsifying medical records. He's convinced that everyone around him is plotting to steal his money. Sarah's voice cracked slightly, just enough to sound genuinely distressed. I'm scared, Your Honor. I don't know what he might do. Dr. Mitchell, you've examined the defendant? Dr. Mitchell stood up, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Yes, Your Honor. In my professional opinion, Mr. Sanders is exhibiting signs of acute paranoid ideation. He presented me with what he claimed was evidence of a conspiracy involving his wife, myself, and a local businessman. When I attempted to discuss his concerns rationally, he became agitated and threatening. Threatening how? He implied that if I didn't cooperate with his delusions, he would take steps to destroy my career. Judge Williams looked at me over his glasses. Mr. Sanders, how do you respond to these allegations? I stood up, feeling calmer than I had any right to feel. Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence of my own. Proceed. Jim Patterson handed me a manila folder containing everything I'd gathered over the past week. Your Honor, these are photographs taken outside the Riverside Motel showing my wife meeting with Tom Brennan, owner of Brennan Motors. These meetings have been occurring twice weekly for the past 4 months. I handed the photos to the bailiff, watching Sarah's face go white. These are bank records showing that my wife has been moving money from our joint accounts into a new account that was opened without my knowledge. And this, I held up the note Thompson had given me, is a handwritten note from my wife to Tom Brennan, discussing property transfers and mental health evaluations. Your Honor, Sarah's lawyer interjected, these documents could be fabricated. These are motel registration records, I continued, showing that Sarah Sanders and Tom Brennan have been renting room 12 every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 months. And these are financial documents recovered from Mr. Brennan's business, showing a pattern of fraudulent activity. Judge Williams examined the documents carefully. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Dr. Mitchell, the judge said finally, were you aware of Mrs. Sanders' relationship with Mr. Brennan when you conducted your evaluation of her husband? Dr. Mitchell's face had gone from white to green. Your Honor, that is, Mrs. Sanders mentioned that she was concerned about her husband's suspicions, but I had no knowledge of any relationship. Because there is no relationship, Sarah said desperately. Jake is having delusions. He's making all of this up. Mrs. Sanders, Judge Williams said quietly, are you testifying under oath that you have never had any romantic or intimate contact with Tom Brennan? Sarah looked like a trapped animal. She glanced at her lawyer, at Dr. Mitchell, at the exit, anywhere but at me. Your Honor, I think I need to speak with my attorney. That's not an answer, Mrs. Sanders. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours. Finally, Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat. We've been seeing each other for a few months, she admitted. But that doesn't mean Jake isn't having mental problems. Your Honor, I said, I'd like to call Officer Thompson as a witness. Thompson had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, and now he walked to the witness stand with the measured pace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Officer Thompson, how did you become involved in this matter? I pulled Mrs. Sanders over for speeding last week. She dropped a note when she got out of her car. The note detailed a plan to have Mr. Sanders declared mentally incompetent in order to gain control of his assets. And what was your assessment of Mr. Sanders when you spoke with him about this situation? Completely rational, upset obviously, but that seemed like a reasonable response to discovering your wife was planning to steal everything you owned. Judge Williams leaned back in his chair, studying the documents spread across his desk. Dr. Mitchell, in light of this new information, do you still believe Mr. Sanders is suffering from paranoid delusions? Dr. Mitchell looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. Your Honor, it appears that Mr. Sanders' suspicions were well-founded. So when he told you that his wife was having an affair, he was telling the truth? Apparently. And when he told you that she was planning to steal his assets, he was telling the truth? It would appear so. And when he told you that you were involved in falsifying a mental health evaluation, he was telling the truth about that as well? Dr. Mitchell didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Judge Williams set down the papers and looked directly at Sarah. Mrs. Sanders, this court finds no evidence that your husband is suffering from any form of mental illness. However, there appears to be substantial evidence that you and Dr. Mitchell conspired to file false charges for the purpose of gaining illegal control of his assets. I'm dismissing this petition and recommending that the district attorney review this matter for possible criminal charges. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and frustration, the tears of someone whose carefully laid plans had just collapsed around her. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Sanders and Dr. Mitchell from my courtroom. Mr. Sanders, you're free to go. I walked out of that courthouse feeling like I could fly. Sarah was ruined, Dr. Mitchell was facing criminal charges, and I had documented evidence of Tom Brennan's fraudulent business practices. But I wasn't done yet. That evening, I drove to Brennan Motors. Tom was standing in the showroom, probably trying to figure out how to salvage his crumbling empire. I walked in like a customer, hands in my pockets, looking around at the shiny cars like I might actually be interested in buying one. Can I help you? Brennan asked, and I had to admire his composure. His whole world was falling apart, but he still had that slick salesman smile. Maybe. I'm Jake Sanders. The smile disappeared. I think you should leave. Probably. But see, Tom, you've created a problem for me. My wife is ruined, my marriage is over, and half the town thinks I'm crazy, all because you couldn't keep your hands off what didn't belong to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You saw an opportunity, lonely housewife, assets worth stealing, husband too trusting to see it coming, classic con man stuff. Brennan glanced toward the service area where I could see two of his mechanics working on a car. You need to leave, now. In a minute. First, I want you to understand something. I'm not just a handyman, Tom. I'm a handyman who spent 15 years in this town, building relationships, earning trust, becoming part of the community. When people around here have problems, they call me to fix them. So you're a problem, Tom. And everyone in town is going to know exactly what kind of problem you are. I pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the hood of the nearest BMW. Financial records from your business, insurance fraud, falsified loan documents, tax evasion. I'm guessing the IRS will be very interested in this information. Brennan lunged for the envelope, but I was faster. That's a copy, genius. The originals are already in the mail to the state attorney general. You son of a bitch. Now, language, Tom. There are ladies present. I nodded toward the customer area, where Mrs. Patterson was pretending to read a brochure while obviously listening to every word. What do you want? I want you to leave town. Tonight. Don't pack, don't say goodbye, don't transfer any more money to offshore accounts. Just get in your car and drive until you reach somewhere that doesn't care about your problems. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning, every person in this town gets a copy of your financial records. Every customer you've cheated, every business partner you've screwed over, every bank you've defrauded. By noon, you'll be lucky if you can get a job cleaning toilets. Brennan's face had gone from confident to desperate in the span of 30 seconds. You can't prove any of this holds up in court. Tom, you're missing the point. I don't need a court. This is a small town. Reputation is everything, and yours is about to become radioactive. I started walking toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Tom? Sarah's going to need a place to stay. Her husband just kicked her out, her job is gone, and her boyfriend is skipping town. Maybe you two deserve each other after all. I left him standing there, probably calculating how fast he could liquidate his assets and disappear. The next morning, I was having coffee at Helen's diner when Danny slid into the booth across from me. So, he said, grinning like he'd just won the lottery, word around town is that you completely destroyed 3 people's lives in a single day. I prefer to think of it as truth in advertising. Sarah's staying at the Riverside Motel. Apparently, she can't afford anywhere else now that her bank accounts are frozen pending investigation. Poetic justice. And get this, Brennan tried to leave town last night, but his BMW broke down on Route 95. State police found him on the side of the road with a suitcase full of cash and falsified business documents. I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you serious? Dead serious. Turns out when you don't properly maintain your vehicles, they tend to fail at inconvenient moments. Who could have predicted that? I looked at Danny suspiciously. You didn't have anything to do with that breakdown, did you? Me? I'm just a simple mechanic. Although I may have forgotten to tighten a few bolts when he brought that Beamer in for service last month. Danny, relax. Nothing dangerous, just embarrassing. Guy wanted to make a dramatic exit, and instead he's sitting in county lookup waiting for his arraignment. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the breakfast crowd filter in and out. Half the town had probably heard some version of yesterday's events by now, and I could feel people looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. So, what now? Danny asked. Now I rebuild. New house, new life, new everything. You could leave town, start fresh somewhere else. Why would I want to leave? This is my home. These are my people. Sarah and Brennan were the outsiders, not me. Fair point. Besides, you're probably going to be the most popular handyman in 3 counties after this. Nothing like publicly destroying a conspiracy to build your reputation. He was right. My phone had been ringing all morning with job offers, most from people who wanted to express their support but were too polite to say so directly. Mrs. Patterson had called to thank me for standing up to those terrible people. Mr. Garcia wanted me to remodel his kitchen. The mayor's wife needed her bathroom renovated, and could I start next week? It was like the whole town had been waiting to see how the story ended, and now that they knew I was the hero instead of the victim, they wanted to be on the winning side. 2 weeks later, I was working on a deck addition for the Hendersons when Sarah pulled into their driveway. She looked terrible, pale, thin, wearing clothes that had seen better days. The confident, manipulative woman who'd tried to steal my life had been replaced by someone who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Jake, can we talk? I set down my hammer and looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Henderson is inside if you want to explain what you're doing on her property. Please, just 5 minutes. I walked over to where she was standing by her car, keeping my distance. What do you want, Sarah? I want to explain. Explain what? How you spent 4 months planning to destroy my life? How you tried to have me committed to a mental hospital? How you were going to steal everything I've worked for? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How is it supposed to happen? She started crying, which might have worked on me 6 months ago. Now it just looked pathetic. Tom said it would be easy. He said we could be together, that you'd never have to know what really happened. He made it sound like we were doing you a favor. A favor? He said you'd be happier without me, that the money would just be compensation for the divorce. Sarah, stop. Just stop talking. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Jake, I'm broke. I can't find a job. I can't afford rent. I don't have anywhere to go. That's not my problem anymore. Please, I'll do anything. I'll sign any papers you want. Give up any claim to anything we own together. Just help me get back on my feet. I looked at this woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity. She was a stranger asking for money. Sarah, you tried to have me declared insane so you could steal my house. You planned to leave me with nothing while you ran off with your boyfriend. Now you want me to help you because your plan didn't work out? I made a mistake. You made a choice, a long series of choices. And now you get to live with the consequences. So that's it? You're just going to let me end up on the street? I'm going to let you figure out your own life, the same way you were going to let me figure out mine after you destroyed it. I walked back to my work area and picked up my hammer. Goodbye, Sarah. She stood there for another minute, probably hoping I'd change my mind. When it became clear that wasn't going to happen, she got back in her car and drove away. I never saw her again. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a nice place downtown, walking distance from everything I needed, when Danny knocked on the door with a six-pack and a newspaper. You need to see this, he said, spreading the paper out on my kitchen table. The headline read, Local businessman sentenced to 5 years for fraud. Below it was a photo of Tom Brennan in handcuffs, looking nothing like the smooth operator who'd tried to steal my wife and my money. 5 years, Danny said, plus restitution to everyone he cheated, which is basically half the county. Guy's going to be paying off debt until he's 80. What about Dr. Mitchell? Lost his license, facing criminal charges for falsifying medical records. Apparently, you weren't the first person he'd tried to screw over. And Sarah? Last I heard, she was working at a truck stop diner outside of Portland. Tips and minimum wage, living in a trailer park. I felt a brief moment of something that might have been sympathy, then remembered the note Thompson had shown me. Sarah had chosen her path, and she'd walk down it with her eyes wide open. You know what the funny thing is? I said. They actually could have just divorced me, split the assets, gone their separate ways. Everyone would have been fine. But then, they wouldn't have gotten everything. Greed makes people stupid. Greed and thinking they're smarter than everyone else. Danny opened 2 beers and handed me one. So what's next for you? More of the same, I guess. Work, save money, maybe buy another house eventually. No thoughts of dating? Maybe someday. But right now, I'm enjoying the quiet. And I was. For the first time in years, I could go to sleep without wondering what lies I'd be told in the morning. I could check my bank balance without worrying that money would be missing. I could trust that the people in my life were exactly who they claimed to be. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was an honest life. And after everything I'd been through, that felt like a victory. 6 months after that, I was finishing up a job at the Miller farm when my phone rang. The number was blocked, but something made me answer it. Jake? It's Officer Thompson. Hey, Thompson, what's up? I wanted to let you know, Sarah's been arrested. I felt my stomach drop. For what? Credit card fraud. Apparently, she's been running the same con she tried to pull on you, except this time she targeted an elderly man in Portland. Guy figured out what she was doing and called the police. Is she going to prison? Looks like it. 2 to 5 years, depending on how much money she stole. I sat down on the Miller's front steps, trying to process this information. Jake, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for letting me know. How do you feel about it? Honestly, nothing. I feel nothing at all. That's probably healthy. Thompson, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you help me? I mean, you could have just let it play out, stayed out of it entirely. Thompson was quiet for a moment. Because sometimes you see something happening that you know is wrong, and you have to choose whether you're going to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Your wife and Brennan thought they were smarter than everyone else, thought they could use the system to steal from someone who'd never hurt anybody. That made me mad. Well, I owe you one. No, you don't. You fought for yourself, Jake. I just pointed you in the right direction. After I hung up, I sat on those steps for a long time, watching the sun set over the Maine countryside. Somewhere out there, Sarah was starting a prison sentence for crimes that probably wouldn't have happened if she'd never met Tom Brennan. Brennan was in his own cell, probably wondering how his foolproof plan had gone so spectacularly wrong, and I was here, free, healthy, and surrounded by people who respected me for exactly who I was. The old Jake might have felt sorry for them, might have wondered if there was something he could have done differently, some way he could have saved his marriage or helped his wife make better choices. But the new Jake understood something the old Jake never had. Some people are takers, and some people are makers, and the takers will always find ways to justify stealing from the makers. Sarah had made her choice long before she met Brennan. She'd chosen to see me as someone to be used rather than someone to be loved. She'd chosen to see our marriage as a business transaction rather than a partnership. Those choices had consequences, and those consequences were hers to live with. I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans, and headed home to my quiet apartment, my honest life, and my clear conscience. Some stories end with forgiveness and redemption. This one just ended.